Red Cloud's War, 1866 to 1868, stands out as a singular and historic confrontation between the Lakota Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho alliance and the expanding United States. This conflict not only represents the only war won by the Plains Indians, but also exemplifies the intense struggle for sovereignty and control over ancestral lands in the face of relentless westward expansion. This comprehensive examination delves into the origins, key battles, strategic maneuvers, and the broader implications of Red Cloud's War, offering a detailed understanding of this pivotal period in American history. The mid-19th century marked a period of aggressive westward expansion in the United States, driven by the belief in manifest destiny, the notion that Americans were destined to expand across the North American continent. This expansion had profound impacts on the Native American tribes who inhabited these lands. Among the most significant developments during this era was the construction of the Bozeman Trail, a route through the Powder River Territory that connected the Oregon Trail to the gold fields in Montana. The Bozeman Trail was initially conceived as a means to facilitate the movement of settlers and miners. However, its construction included the establishment of a series of military forts intended to protect these travelers from Native American resistance. To many Plains Indians, including the Lakota Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho, the construction of these forts signaled a direct threat to their way of life and territorial sovereignty. The realization that the trail was not merely a passage, but a conduit for further encroachment and colonization catalyzed Red Cloud's resistance. Red Cloud, born Mokpialuda in 1822, emerged as a formidable leader of the Oglala Lakota Sioux. His leadership was characterized by a combination of traditional warrior skills and a nuanced understanding of the changing dynamics brought about by white settlers. His early experiences with Euro-American traders and explorers provided him with valuable insights into their tactics and intentions. Red Cloud's opposition to the Bozeman Trail was grounded in a broader resistance to the encroachment on Sioux lands. Initially, he viewed the trail as a temporary inconvenience, but grew increasingly concerned when he realized that the establishment of military forts along the trail would lead to permanent occupation. His strategic response involved uniting various Plains tribes to confront the advancing American forces. Red Cloud's approach to warfare was marked by guerrilla tactics, a strategy well suited to the terrain of the Powder River Territory. His forces employed hit-and-run attacks, ambushes, and raids against military and civilian targets. This strategy allowed them to inflict significant casualties and disrupt the operations of the U.S. military and settlers without engaging in large-scale, conventional battles. The Battle of the Hundred in the Hands, also known as the Fetterman Fight or Fetterman Massacre, on December 21, 1866, stands as the most famous and decisive engagement of Red Cloud's War. This battle was a significant victory for Red Cloud and his allies. The conflict occurred when a force of approximately 80 soldiers led by Captain William J. Fetterman was lured into a trap by a larger coalition of Lakota Sioux and allied tribes. Fetterman's forces were ambushed and overwhelmed in what would become one of the worst defeats for the U.S. Army during the Indian Wars. The victory had a profound psychological impact, demonstrating the capability and resolve of the Plains tribes to defend their territory effectively. The Hayfield Fight and the Wagon Box Fight, both in 1867, were additional significant engagements in Red Cloud's War. The Hayfield Fight, which occurred on July 26, 1867, involved a defensive stand by a small contingent of U.S. soldiers and civilians at a supply train depot. The Wagon Box Fight, occurring on August 2, 1867, was another notable battle where a group of soldiers and civilians managed to hold off an attacking force of Lakota Sioux and Cheyenne using a defensive wagon corral. Both battles highlighted the intensity of the conflict and the tactical prowess of both the Native American and U.S. forces. The prolonged and successful resistance mounted by Red Cloud and his allies led the U.S. government to seek a negotiated settlement. The Treaty of Fort Laramie, signed on April 29, 1868, marked a significant achievement for the Plains Indians. The treaty established the Great Sioux Reservation, encompassing the majority of present-day South Dakota, parts of North Dakota, and Nebraska. It also promised to cede the land to the Sioux forever. a commitment that would later be tragically ignored. The treaty represented a rare instance of Native American leaders securing terms that were more favorable than those typically imposed by the U.S. government. Red Cloud's success in negotiating the treaty demonstrated his diplomatic skills and strategic acumen. However, the promise of land was undermined by subsequent events, particularly the discovery of gold in the Black Hills. In 1874, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer led an expedition into the Black Hills and discovered gold. This discovery ignited the Black Hills gold rush of 1876, leading thousands of miners and settlers into the sacred and treaty-protected Black Hills. The U.S. government's decision to ignore the Fort Laramie Treaty's terms and allow the influx of miners into the Black Hills precipitated a new conflict known as the Great Sioux War. Red Cloud chose not to participate in this subsequent conflict, opting instead to focus on advocating for Native American rights through legal means. His decision was reflective of his broader strategy to seek justice and preservation of Sioux rights through diplomacy rather than continued armed resistance. Following the signing of the Fort Laramie Treaty, Red Cloud continued to work on behalf of his people, navigating the increasingly complex and often hostile relationship between the Sioux and the U.S. government. He became a prominent figure in advocating for Native American rights and justice, making trips to Washington, D.C. to negotiate with government officials. Although Red Cloud's efforts to secure the Sioux's rights through legal means faced numerous challenges, his leadership and achievements in Red Cloud's war left a lasting legacy. His ability to unite different tribes and mount a successful resistance against the U.S. military exemplified the strength and resilience of the Plains Indian nations. Red Cloud's War is a landmark event in American history, illustrating the intense struggles faced by Native American tribes in the face of westward expansion. The conflict highlighted the complexities of U.S. Native American relations and the often broken promises made by the U.S. government. The subsequent violation of the Fort Laramie Treaty and the exploitation of the Black Hills underscored the challenges faced by Native American leaders in preserving their lands and sovereignty. The story of Red Cloud and his war serves as a powerful testament to the courage, strategic brilliance, and resilience of the Plains Indians. It remains a crucial chapter in understanding the broader narrative of Native American resistance and the impact of U.S. expansionism on indigenous peoples. Red Cloud's War was a defining moment in the history of Native American resistance against U.S. expansion. The conflict's outcomes, including the temporary halting of further expansion and the establishment of the Great Sioux Reservation, were significant achievements for the Plains tribes. However, the subsequent violations of the Fort Laramie Treaty and the Black Hills Gold Rush underscored the ongoing struggles faced by Native Americans. Red Cloud's leadership and efforts continue to be remembered as a symbol of resistance, resilience, and the enduring quest for justice and sovereignty. Background in early hostilities, the Powder River region in modern-day northeastern Wyoming had been claimed by the Crow Nation until 1820 when the Cheyenne, allied with the Lakota Sioux, defeated them in the engagement known as the Tongue River Massacre. The Sioux then expanded the territory, fighting wars with other nations including the Kiowa, Pawnee, Ute, and, of course, the Crow. Around 1825, white settlers arrived in the region, and by 1835, they had established the Fort William Trading Post. Conflict between the different Native American nations and between bands from various nations and white settlers over land rights resulted in the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851, which defined and allotted specific areas to the different nations. According to the Crow, the Powder River region was theirs, but in keeping with the tradition of Native American warfare, it now belonged to the Sioux who had defeated them in 1820. The treaty sided with the Crow, who were on good terms with the U.S. government. The Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851 promised all the lands in question would be regarded as Indian territory and made clear the United States had no claim to them. In 1858, however, Pikes Peak Gold Rush carried an influx of white prospectors to the region of modern-day Colorado, ignoring the treaty and bringing the miners and settlers into conflict with Native American nations. As more settlers arrived, more natives were displaced and fought with each other for prime hunting grounds, and at the same time, The U.S. government was encouraging white hunters to slaughter the buffalo of the Great Plains. And as the buffalo were the major source of food and clothing for the Plains Indians, this led to further conflict between the nations over fewer resources. A major article of the 1851 treaty stipulated that Native Americans would allow white settlers to pass unmolested along the Oregon Trail, but even with treaties that were signed by chiefs with the authority to do so, the U.S. government consistently made the mistake of thinking that the signature of the chief of one band of a nation guaranteed the compliance of all citizens of that nation. Red Cloud, for example, was regularly referenced as the chief of the Sioux, but was actually only the leader of the band of Sioux known as the Bad Faces. As such, he could only speak for the Bad Faces, not the entire Sioux nation, and not even another band. Some bands honored the 1851 treaty, others, whose chiefs had not signed or had never even heard of it, did not. In June 1866, a pivotal moment in the history of the American West unfolded as representatives of the United States government sought to address the escalating tensions with the Sioux and their allies. The negotiations, held at Fort Laramie, were intended to resolve disputes and prevent further conflict as the U.S. pushed westward. Among the Sioux delegates present were Red Cloud, an esteemed Oglala Lakota Sioux chief, and Young Man Afraid of His Horses, Tasunka Koki Poppy, another prominent leader renowned for his warrior prowess. Red Cloud's willingness to allow white settlers to traverse Sioux lands had been a strategic decision aimed at avoiding direct confrontation. However, the idea of permanent settlements and military forts on Sioux territory was anathema to the Sioux leaders. Red Cloud, in particular, had always maintained a position of cautious engagement, permitting transient use of the land but staunchly opposing any encroachment that threatened Sioux sovereignty. Colonel Henry B. Carrington, who had recently arrived with orders to establish forts in the Powder River region, joined the negotiations. Carrington's mission was clear: to secure the area for settlers and to build a network of garrisons to safeguard them from perceived Native American threats. The realization that the U.S. intended not only to establish temporary outposts, but to create enduring settlements was a severe blow to Red Cloud and his delegation. The perceived betrayal led to a dramatic walkout by Red Cloud, signaling the start of a determined and unified resistance against the U.S. expansion. In the aftermath of the failed negotiations, Red Cloud and his allies, including the Cheyenne and Arapaho, began organizing a concerted military response. The ensuing months saw the construction and fortification of Fort Phil Kearny and Fort C. F. Smith by Carrington and his command. These forts, intended as bulwarks for settler safety, were seen by the Sioux as symbols of invasion and oppression. As the U.S. military worked on its fortifications, Red Cloud was busy rallying his people and formulating his strategy for war. The Sioux War Council held in November 1866, as described by scholars Bob Drury and Tom Clavin, was a crucial moment of collective resolve and strategic planning. Situated on the sandy banks of Goose Creek, where it merged with the icy Tongue River, the council was a blend of spiritual invocation and tactical deliberation. Red Cloud addressed his warriors with a powerful speech, invoking the spirits of their ancestors and reaffirming their divine right to the land. His oration was not just a call to arms, but a reaffirmation of the Sioux' historical and spiritual connection to their homeland. The emphasis on spiritual support and ancestral legitimacy was central to the Sioux' understanding of their struggle, framing their resistance as both a sacred duty and a fight for survival. In 1875, Red Cloud visited Washington, D.C. once again to address the issue of the Black Hills and to seek redress for the violations of the treaty. His continued advocacy was a testament to his commitment to his people and his determination to seek justice through nonviolent means. Red Cloud's death on December 10, 1909, at the age of 88, was met with significant attention and respect. The New York Times highlighted his legacy, noting his dedication to peace after his initial military campaigns. The newspaper acknowledged that while Red Cloud had fought fiercely for his people's rights, he had honored the peace treaty he signed, even as it was repeatedly broken by the U.S. government. Red Cloud's War was a pivotal conflict in the history of Native American resistance against the U.S. expansion. Red Cloud's leadership, strategic innovations, and commitment to his people's rights exemplify the complex and multifaceted nature of indigenous resistance. His legacy continues to inspire and inform contemporary efforts to address historical injustices and to advocate for the rights of Native American communities. The ongoing struggles of the Land Back movement and other advocacy efforts reflect the enduring impact of Red Cloud's legacy. As the U.S. government continues to grapple with the consequences of its historical policies, the principles and goals championed by Red Cloud and his allies remain relevant and vital in the quest for justice and equity for Native American peoples.